The sky above Vareth 9 burned orange and red as another ship crashed into the distant mountains. And Dr. Elena Voss did not even look up from her work anymore because she had seen too many ships fall today to care about one more. She was stitching closed a wound on a young soldier's arm when the screaming started outside her medical tent, and she heard voices in languages she did not understand. Panic and fear mixing together in the cold morning air. What now? She muttered to herself as she finished the final stitch and told the soldier to rest. Elena Voss was 43 years old, and she had been a combat surgeon for over 20 years, working in the worst places humanity had ever fought. And she thought she had seen everything that war could offer until today. The flap of her tent flew open, and a small creature rushed inside. Its blue skin covered in dirt and blood, its forearms waving wildly as it tried to speak. "Human doctor," the Kovani scout shouted, its translator crackling with static. "You must come outside now, please. We need help that no one else will give." Elena grabbed her medical bag and followed the scout into the chaos of the camp, stepping over broken equipment and wounded soldiers from a dozen different species, all of them here to fight against the enemy that threatened their worlds. The Kovani led her to the edge of the camp, where a crowd had gathered in a circle, and they were all keeping their distance from something on the ground. Something massive and dark and covered in glowing violet blood. Elena pushed through the crowd and stopped when she saw what lay before her. It was a Dexiange had never seen one in person before, only in military briefings and warning videos that told soldiers to run if they ever met one on the battlefield. Because Dexians were the most dangerous warriors in the known galaxy, and they showed no mercy to anyone. This one was huge, over 9 feet tall, even as it lay on the ground. Its black armored body cracked open in several places where enemy weapons had found their marks, and that strange purple blood was pooling beneath it like a glowing lake. "Commander Vareth Call," the Kovani scout whispered. "He is one of their greatest leaders, and he was fighting on our side in this battle. But now he is dying, and no one will help him." Elena looked around at the crowd, at the doctors and medics from other species who stood there doing nothing, and she felt anger rise in her chest. Why is no one treating him? She demanded a tall Veloci physician step forward, his silver robes stained with the blood of other patients. And he shook his head slowly. "It cannot be done, human. Dexian biology is too complex and too dangerous. Their blood is acidic. Their organs are arranged in ways we do not understand. And any attempt to save him would only cause more suffering before his inevitable death. So you are just going to watch him die? There is nothing else to do. Even the Vexian Medical Corps has said that wounds like these are beyond saving. It is more merciful to let him pass quickly." Elena stared at the Veloci doctor for a long moment. Then she walked past him and knelt beside the dying Dexian warrior, his 4 eyes open slightly, glowing a dim yellow color, and she could see the pain in them, the awareness that death was coming for him and that everyone had already given up. "Human," he growled, his voice deep and rough like stones grinding together. "Do not waste your time on me. Go help those who can be saved. Can you understand me?" Elena asked, ignoring his words. "Yes. My translator still works, but it does not matter. You cannot fix what has been broken inside me." "No one can." Elena opened her medical bag and pulled out her scanner, running it over his massive body and reading the results on the small screen. And what she saw made her heart beat faster, because it was bad, very bad. Worse than almost anything she had dealt with before. Almost anything. 3 hearts, she said quietly to herself. And 2 of them are damaged. Major bleeding in what looks like a secondary respiratory system. Neural clusters scattered throughout the body. Acid-based blood that will eat through standard equipment. She sat back on her heels and thought for a moment while the crowd watched her in silence. "Human," the Dexian said again. "Weaker now, Why do you not leave like the others? Elena looked into his 4 eyes, and she saw something there that she recognized. Something she had seen in countless patients over the years. A desperate hope buried beneath acceptance of death. A tiny voice asking someone to please try, even when trying seemed pointless. She reached into her bag and pulled out a cigarette, lighting it and taking a long drag while she made her decision. "What is your name?" she asked. "I am WorHFY, commander of the 3rd Dexian Strike Fleet." "Well, WorHFY, I am Dr. Elena Voss, and I am going to do something very stupid today." She stood up and pointed at the Corvani scout who had brought her here. "You, what is your name?" "Yellen, Doctor. Yellen, you are now my assistant. Go to my tent and bring everything you can carry, all of it. Do not leave anything behind." The Corvani nodded and ran off toward the medical tent. Elena turned to the crowd and raised her voice so everyone could hear her. "I need this area cleared right now. And I need someone to find me a portable generator and any acid-resistant equipment you can get your hands on. Move." The crowd stood frozen for a moment, unsure how to respond to this small human woman giving them orders, until Elena took another drag of her cigarette and shouted even louder, "I said move. Unless you want to stand there and watch this warrior die while you do nothing." They scattered in all directions, and Elena knelt back down beside WorHFY and began to prepare for the impossible surgery ahead. "Human," WorHFY said, his voice barely a whisper now, "you will fail, and you may die trying. My blood will burn you. My body will reject your help. This is foolish." Elena smiled at him, a tired smile that had seen too much death and refused to see any more today. "Relax. Big guy, I have fixed worse than you. Now save your strength, because you are going to need it." She put out her cigarette and opened her surgical kit as Yellen returned with armfuls of equipment. The real work was about to begin. The inside of the surgical tent was hot and filled with the sharp smell of chemicals as Elena worked to prepare WorHFY for the operation that everyone said could not be done. Eileen the Corvani nurse stood beside her holding a bright light over the massive body of the Dexian commander, and the small alien's hands were shaking so badly that the light kept moving back and forth. "Steady," Elena said calmly. "I need you to be my rock right now, Yellen. Can you do that for me?" "I will try, Doctor, but I have never seen anything like this before. His insides are so different from anything I studied in medical training." Elena looked down at the open wounds in WorHFY's chest, and she understood what Yellen meant. Because Dexian biology was nothing like any species she had worked on before, where humans had one heart in the center of their chest. WorHFY had 3 hearts arranged in a triangle pattern, and 2 of them were badly damaged by whatever weapon had struck him in battle, where humans had red blood that helped and healed. WorHFY had glowing purple blood that hissed and smoked whenever it touched her standard surgical tools, eating through the metal like fire through paper. "Hand me the acid-resistant clamps," Elena ordered. And Yellen quickly passed her the equipment that someone in the camp had found from an old Dexian supply crate. Elena reached into WorHFY's chest cavity and clamped off a bleeding vessel, watching as his purple blood tried to eat through even the resistant metal. Though it held long enough for her to work, his secondary heart is destroyed, she announced after examining the damage more closely. "There is no way to repair it. The tissue is completely gone." "Then it is hopeless?" Yellen asked, fear clear in the young Corvani's voice. "I did not say that. Humans have survived with only 1 heart for years, maybe decades in some cases. The question is whether a Dexian can do the same with 2 hearts instead of 3. She began working on the primary heart, which had taken less damage but was still bleeding from several small tears in its thick muscular wall. And she stitched each tear closed with careful precision, even as the acidic blood burned tiny holes in her protective gloves. WorHFY's eyes suddenly snapped. open, and his massive clawed hand shot up and grabbed Elena's wrist with crushing force. She felt the bones in her arm grinding together, and pain exploded through her body. But she did not scream, and she did not pull away. "Human," WorHFY growled, his four eyes wild with pain and confusion. "What are you doing to me? Why does everything burn?" "You woke up during surgery," Elena said through gritted teeth, "which is very rude, by the way. Now let go of my arm before you break it, and I cannot finish saving your life." The Dexian's grip did not loosen. "Let me die with honor, human. This is not the way of my people. We do not cling to life when death has chosen us." Elena looked directly into his glowing yellow eyes, and she did not look away, even though her arm felt like it was about to shatter. "Listen to me very carefully, Commander. I do not care about your traditions right now. I do not care about what your people think is honorable. What I care about is that you have two hearts that still work, and lungs that still breathe, and a brain that is clearly still functioning because you will not shut up." She leaned closer to his face. "You are not dying today because I will not let you. So either help me or get out of my way, but you will not stop me from doing my job." Something changed in Varath's eyes. Something shifted from resistance to something that might have been respect, or might have been simple shock that this tiny creature was speaking to him this way. His grip on her wrist loosened and his arm fell back to his side. "You are either very brave or very foolish, human. I have been told it is both," Elena replied as she went back to work on his chest. "Now stay awake if you can, because I might need you to tell me if something feels wrong inside." "Everything feels wrong inside. More wrong than it already does. You know what I mean." Yellen handed Elena another tool, and she began the delicate work of reconnecting torn blood vessels. Working faster now because she knew that every minute that passed meant more blood loss and more damage to his organs. The tent flap opened behind her, and she heard footsteps approaching. "Dr. Voss," a cold voice said. And Elena recognized it as the Veloci ambassador who had been watching from outside. "You must stop this immediately. I am busy," Elena said without turning around. "You do not understand the political situation here. If Commander WorHFY dies under human hands, the Dexian Empire may see it as an act of war. They may blame humanity for his death, and if I let him die without trying, what does that make us? It makes us safe. It makes us neutral. It makes us survivors of a war we did not start." Elena continued working, her hands moving with practiced speed even as she spoke. "Get out of my surgical tent, ambassador. You do not have the authority to order me anywhere, human." Elena finally turned around, and Yellen would later tell others that the look in the human doctor's eyes was more terrifying than anything the young Kovani had ever seen. A cold fury that seemed to make the air itself grow heavy. "This is my operating room. And in my operating room, I am the highest authority there is. Kings and generals and ambassadors all become equal when they are bleeding on my table. And right now you are standing between me and my patient." She took a step toward the Veloci. "So either pick up a tool and help me, or get out before I have you removed. And do not think for 1 second that I will not do it." The ambassador stared at her for a long moment, then turned and left the tent without another word. Elena went back to Var's side and continued her work. "You have made an enemy today, human," WorHFY said weakly. "The Veloci do not forget insults." "Good. Let them remember. Now, stop talking and let me concentrate, because I am about to do something very difficult, and I need to focus." She reached deeper into his chest and began the most dangerous part of the surgery, rerouting blood flow from his destroyed secondary heart to the two hearts that still functioned outside the tent. The sounds of the camp grew quiet as word spread about what was happening inside, and species that had been enemies for centuries stood together in silence, waiting to see if the impossible could be done. The surgery had been going for 8 hours when Varath's primary heart stopped beating for the first time. Elena heard the change in his breathing before she saw it on her monitors. A sudden stillness that spread through his massive body like a wave. And she knew immediately what had happened. "No, no, no," she muttered as she grabbed the emergency equipment from her bag. "You do not get to die on me now. Not after everything we have been through. Doctor, what is happening?" Yellen cried out, the young Kurvani's voice high with panic. His heart stopped. "I need to restart it. Hold the light steady and do not move." Elena pulled out her portable defibrillator and placed the pads on Varath's chest. But when she pressed the button to deliver the shock, nothing happened. "The machine is not working." Yellen shouted. Elena looked at the device and realized that Varath's acidic blood had gotten inside it during the surgery, eating through the delicate electronics and destroying them from the inside. She had maybe 30 seconds before his brain started to die. "Yellen, run outside and find any power source you can. A generator, a ship battery. Anything that can deliver an electrical charge. Run now." The Kurvani dropped the light and sprinted out of the tent. Elena began chest compressions on Varath's massive body, pushing down on his primary heart with all her strength. But his chest was so thick and his heart was so deep that she could barely make a difference. "Come on, you stubborn warrior," she growled through clenched teeth. "You survived a battle that killed thousands. You will not die from a surgery." Yellen returned carrying a heavy battery pack from a crashed fighter ship, cables trailing behind like metal snakes. "I found this, doctor. Will it work?" Elena grabbed the cables and stripped the ends with her teeth, then touched the bare wires together to test the charge and saw bright sparks fly into the air. "It will work if it does not kill him first. And honestly, right now that is a risk I am willing to take." She pressed the cables directly against Varath's exposed heart and sent the electrical charge surging through his body. His back arched off the table and his eyes flew open and his mouth opened in a silent scream of pain. But his heart did not start beating again. Elena shouted, and she pressed the cables to his heart a second time. Another surge of electricity. Another violent reaction from his body, and then she heard it. The slow, steady rhythm of his heart beginning to pump once more. Elena collapsed against the table and took several deep breaths before standing up straight again. "How much longer can this continue, doctor?" Yellen asked quietly. Elena looked at the young Kurvani and saw exhaustion in those alien eyes that matched what she felt in her own bones. "As long as it needs to." Yellen, "We are not done yet." The hours continued to pass, each one harder than the last. At hour 12, Elena's hands began to shake so badly that she could not hold her surgical tools steady. And she solved this problem by wrapping tape around her fingers and wrists until her hands could not tremble anymore. At hour 14, Varath stopped breathing and she had to manually pump air into his lungs through a tube while also continuing to repair the damage to his internal organs. At hour 16, his heart stopped for the second time, and she lost him completely for 11 minutes, the longest 11 minutes of her life, during which she massaged his heart by hand while Yellen sobbed in the corner, and Elena refused to give up even though every piece of logic in her mind told her it was over. When his heart finally started beating again on its own, she did not celebrate or cheer. She simply moved on to the next problem, because there was always another problem waiting outside the tent. Word of what was happening had spread beyond the camp. Species from across the battlefield had gathered to watch. Hundreds of beings who had been fighting and dying just hours ago, now standing in silence as a single human. Doctor fought to save a life that everyone had already written off as lost. Some of them had come out of curiosity, wanting to see what kind of madness had taken hold of this human woman. Some had come out of respect, recognizing the courage it took to attempt something so impossible, and some had come hoping to witness a miracle. because in times of war, miracles were rare and precious things that reminded everyone why they were fighting in the first place at Hour. 18 Elena finally stepped back from the table and looked at her WorHFY's chest was closed, stitched together with a combination of human surgical thread and alien bonding agents that she had mixed together in a desperate experiment that somehow worked. His two remaining hearts were beating in a strange rhythm that was not quite right, but was close enough to keep him alive. His breathing was shallow but steady, moving air in and out of lungs that had been torn and repaired and torn again over the course of the night. He was violent, stared at the sleeping Dexian commander and then at Elena, and the young Kurvani's eyes were filled with something that looked like wonder. "You did it, Doctor. You actually did it. Everyone said it was impossible, and you did it anyway." Elena wanted to smile, but she was too tired to move the muscles in her face. "He is not safe yet, Yellen. The next few days will be critical. If infection sets in, or if his body rejects the repairs, then we will be right back where we started. But he has a chance now. Before tonight, he had no chance at all, and you gave him one." Elena looked down at her hands, at the burns on her skin where his acidic blood had eaten through her gloves, at the bruises on her wrist where he had grabbed her, at the tape that still held her shaking fingers together. She had given everything she had to keep this warrior alive now. She could only wait and see if it would be enough. "Yellen," she said quietly, "I need you to watch him while I rest. Do not leave his side for any reason. And if anything changes, you wake me immediately, no matter what. Where will you be, Doctor?" Elena pointed to a small chair in the corner of the tent. A simple folding chair that looked barely big enough to hold her. "Right there. I'm not going anywhere until I know he's going to survive." She walked to the chair and sat down heavily, and within seconds she was asleep, her body finally surrendering to the exhaustion that she had been fighting for almost a full day outside the tent. The crowd began to slowly drift away, but many of them would remember this night for the rest of their lives. They would tell stories about the human doctor who did not know how to quit, and those stories would spread far beyond this small moon, to places and peoples that Elena Voss had never heard of, planting seeds that would one day grow into something much larger than anyone could have imagined. 3 days passed before WorHFY opened his eyes again. During those 3 days, Elena Voss did not leave the medical tent for more than a few minutes at a time, sleeping in her small chair and eating whatever food Yellen brought her and watching over her patient like a guard protecting something precious. She changed his bandages every 6 hours, checking for signs of infection and adjusting the strange mixture of human and alien medicines that she had created to help his body heal. She monitored his 2 remaining hearts, watching their rhythm on her scanner and making small corrections. Whenever something seemed wrong, she talked to him even though he was unconscious, telling him stories about Earth and about the wars she had survived and about the patients she had lost and the ones she had saved, because she believed that somewhere deep inside his mind, he could hear her and that her voice might give him something to hold on to on the morning of the 3rd day. His 4 eyes slowly opened and focused on the ceiling of the tent above him. Elena noticed the change immediately and moved to his side. "Welcome back, Commander. How do you feel?" WorHFY tried to speak, but his throat was too dry, and Elena held a cup of water to his lips and helped him drink. "I feel like I've been torn apart and put back together by someone who did not have all the pieces," he finally managed to say, his voice rough and weak. That is actually a pretty accurate description of what happened. WorHFY turned his head to look at her, and she could see confusion in his yellow eyes as he tried to understand what he was seeing. "You are still here, human. Where else would I be? I do not understand. You have other patients, other duties. Why would you stay beside me all this time?" Elena sat down on the edge of his bed, which creaked under her weight, even though she was so much smaller than the massive warrior. because my job is not finished until you can walk out of here on your own. That is how I work. Varth was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. And then he asked a question that Elena had been expecting since the moment she decided to save his life. Why did you do it, human? Why did you save me when everyone else had given up? Elena thought about her answer carefully before she spoke. When I was young, just starting out as a doctor, I worked in a hospital on Mars during the insurrection. And one night they brought in a man who had been hurt so badly that everyone said he was going to die. She paused, remembering. The other doctors walked away because they thought it was hopeless. But I stayed with him, and I tried everything I could think of, and in the end he survived. He lived another 30 years, and he had children and grandchildren who would never have existed if I had given up that night. She looked into Varath's eyes. That taught me something important, Commander. It taught me that impossible is just a word that people use when they are too tired or too scared to keep trying. Varath considered her words, turning them over in his mind like precious stones. Among my people, we have a word for what you did. We call it Kalvith. It means the act of refusing to accept defeat, even when all hope is lost, even when the universe itself seems to demand surrender. Is that a good thing in your culture? It is the highest honor a warrior can achieve, to practice. Kalvith is to demonstrate that your spirit is stronger than the forces arrayed against you. He reached up with one massive clawed hand and touched the bandages on his chest. But I have never seen Kalvith practiced by a healer before. We always thought it was a quality that belonged only to fighters. Elena smiled tiredly. Maybe that is because you have not met enough human doctors. The tent flap opened and Yellen rushed in, excitement clear in every movement. Dr. Voss, Commander, there are ships approaching. Vexian warships, a whole fleet of them. Elena stood up quickly, her hand moving instinctively toward the weapon she kept hidden under her coat. How many ships? At least 50. They will be here within the hour. Varath made a sound that Elena realized was laughter. A deep rumbling noise that shook his entire body. Do not be afraid, human. They are coming for me. Word of what happened here must have reached my people. And they are sending 50 warships? That seems like a lot for a rescue mission. I am not just any warrior, Dr. Voss. I am the commander of a strike fleet and a member of one of the oldest noble houses in the Empire. And more importantly, I am the brother of the Vexian Emperor. Elena stared at him. You are royalty, and you did not think to mention this earlier? Would it have changed how you treated me? She thought about it for a second and then shook her head. No, probably not. Then it was not important to mention. The Vexian warships arrived exactly when Yellen had predicted. Massive vessels that blotted out the sun as they descended through the atmosphere. Soldiers in black armor poured out of the landing craft. Their weapons ready, their formations perfect. And Elena could see the fear in the eyes of every other species in the camp as these legendary warriors marched toward her medical tent. She stepped outside to meet them and found herself face to face with a Vexian who looked almost identical to Varath. The same black exoskeleton and yellow eyes, though this one carried himself with even more authority. I am Kareth Kal, Emperor of the Vexian Dominion, he announced, his voice booming across the camp. Where is my brother? Elena did not bow or show any sign of intimidation. He is inside, recovering from surgery, and he is not ready to be moved yet. The Emperor's 4 eyes narrowed. You dare to give orders to me, human? When it comes to the health of my patients, yes, I dare. For a moment the air was thick with tension, and Elena was certain that she was about to die, that this Emperor would simply destroy her for her insolence. Then Varath's voice came from behind her. Brother, do not harm this human. She is the reason I am still alive. The Emperor looked past Elena to see Varath standing in the entrance of the medical tent, weak and bandaged but alive. And something changed in his expression. You were told that your wounds were fatal, that nothing could be done. I was told many things, brother, But this human refused to listen to any of them. The Emperor turned his attention back to Elena. And now, instead of anger, she saw something that might have been curiosity or even respect. "Tell me, human, how did you do what our own healers said was impossible?" Elena shrugged. "I did not accept that it was impossible. That is all. I just kept working until I found a way." The Emperor was silent for a long moment. And then he did something that made every Vexian soldier in the area gasp in shock. He bowed his head to her. "The Vexian Empire does not forget those who save our blood," he said formally. "From this day forward, Dr. Elena Voss, you are named Kalvathrai, which means one who refuses defeat, and you will be honored by my people for as long as our empire stands." Elena was not sure how to respond to this, so she simply nodded. "Thank you, Emperor, but I was just doing my job." Karathkal smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth that would have terrified her a few days ago. "Yes, human. I am beginning to understand that about your species." 6 months had passed since that night on Vareth 9, and the galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. Elena Voss stood in front of a mirror in her small quarters on the human diplomatic vessel, struggling with the buttons on her dress uniform that she had not worn in over 15 years. "I look ridiculous," she muttered to herself, pulling at the collar that felt like it was trying to strangle Hiraelen, who had refused to leave her side since that night and had become something between an assistant and a friend. Clicked in amusement from the doorway. "You look very official, Doctor. The representatives of humanity should be proud to have you among them today. I am a Surgeon Yellen, not a diplomat. I should be in a hospital somewhere saving lives instead of standing around in a fancy room while politicians make speeches. And yet here you are, invited personally by Commander WorHFY to attend the most important gathering the Galactic Senate has seen in centuries." Elena sighed and gave up on making herself look presentable. "Fine. Let us get this over with." The Galactic Senate chamber was enormous. A vast circular room that could hold thousands of representatives from hundreds of different species. All of them here today because of a rumor that had been spreading through the galaxy for weeks. The Vexians were going to make an announcement in over 2,000 years of recorded history. The Vexian Empire had never formed an alliance with any other species. They conquered or they ignored. Those were the only two options they had ever offered to the rest of the galaxy. But the rumor said that today would be different. Elena found her seat among the human delegation and tried to make herself as small as possible. Hoping that no one would notice her or ask her to speak, she watched as representatives from every major species filed into the chamber. Veloci in their silver robes, Kovani in their blue ceremonial armor, Dravith with their floating platforms that carried their aquatic bodies, and dozens of others whose names she did not know then. The main doors opened, and silence fell across the chamber. WorHFY walked in, followed by an honor guard of Vexian warriors in their black armor. He looked different than he had on that battlefield 6 months ago. Stronger and more powerful, his wounds fully healed, and his body restored to its terrifying glory. But Elena noticed that he still carried scars on his chest, visible through the gaps in his ceremonial armor, and she knew that he had chosen to keep those scars rather than having them removed. The Vexians did not remove scars that were earned with honor. WorHFY took his place at the center of the chamber and looked out at the assembled representatives, his 4 eyes moving slowly across the crowd until they found Elena. Among the human delegation, he held her gaze for a moment, and she saw something in his expression that might have been gratitude or respect or friendship, something that crossed the vast differences between their species and connected them as two beings who had faced death together. Then he began to speak. For 2,000 years, the Vexian Empire has stood alone. His voice echoed through the chamber, translated into every language simultaneously. We have conquered worlds and defeated enemies and built an empire that stretches across 100 star systems. We have done this without allies because we believed that we did not need them." He paused, letting his words sink in. 6 months ago, I lay dying on a battlefield, my body broken and my spirit ready to surrender to death. Every doctor in the Alliance had already given up on me. Every species had calculated the political cost of trying to save my life and decided it was not worth the risk. His eyes found Elena again, except one. The chamber was absolutely silent as WorHFY continued. A human doctor, a small fragile creature without claws or armor or any of the weapons that my people value, walked into a situation that everyone else had fled from and refused to accept that I was going to die. She worked for 18 hours without rest. She brought me back from death, not once but twice. She faced opposition from ambassadors and politicians who wanted her to stop. And she never wavered, not for 1 second. He stepped forward, his massive form commanding the attention of every being in the room. When I asked her why she did it, why she risked so much for a stranger from a species that her people feared, do you know what she said? "No one in the chamber breathed," she said. "Because you needed help, that is the whole reason." WorHFY raised his clawed fist and placed it over his primary heart. "On that night, I learned something about humans that your Senate's files and intelligence reports had failed to teach me. I learned that humans do not ask if something can be done before they try to do it. They do not calculate the odds of success before they begin. They simply refuse to accept that failure is an option." He turned to face the human delegation directly. "This makes them the most dangerous species in the galaxy." A murmur ran through the chamber, fear and uncertainty spreading among the representatives, but it also makes them the most worthy of respect. WorHFY reached into his armor and pulled out a document sealed with the symbol of the Dexian Empire. "I stand before this Senate today to announce that the Dexian Dominion formally requests a mutual defense pact with the Human Confederacy, the first alliance my people have formed in over 2,000 years. The chamber erupted into chaos, representatives shouting and arguing and trying to understand what they had just heard. But Elena barely noticed the noise around her because WorHFY was walking toward her, the crowd parting before him like water before a ship, until he stood directly in front of her seat. "Dr. Elena Vos," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "The Kalvathrai who refused to let me die." Elena stood up, feeling very small next to his massive form. "Commander WorHFY, you did not have to do all of this. I was just doing my job." WorHFY smiled, showing those sharp teeth that no longer frightened her at all. "And that is exactly why I did it human. Because to you, saving lives is simply what you do. It is not heroic or exceptional. It is just normal." He looked out at the chaotic chamber around them. "My people have always respected strength. We thought that strength meant having the biggest weapons and the toughest armor and the most fearsome reputation. But you taught me something different." He looked back at her. "True strength is the refusal to give up when giving up would be easy. It is the courage to keep fighting when everyone else has stopped. It is the stubborn belief that impossible is just a word and that limits are just challenges waiting to be overcome. Humans have this strength, perhaps more than any species in the galaxy. And from this day forward, the Dexian Empire will stand beside you." Elena did not know what to say, so she said the only thing that felt right. "Thank you, WorHFY. That means a lot to me. Do not thank me, human. I am simply repaying a debt. And besides, I have a feeling that the galaxy is going to need your stubbornness in the years to come." She thought about asking what he meant, but she already knew the answer. There were always more battles to fight, more patience to save, more impossible situations that required someone foolish enough to try anyway. And Elena Vos had never been good at accepting defeat. 3 years later, when the Void Swarm emerged from dark space and threatened to destroy everything the galaxy had built. It was a Vexian warfleet that held the line at Earth's border while humanity evacuated its outer colonies, and, at the helm of the medical frigate, racing into the heart of the battle, Dr. Elena Voss lit a cigarette and smiled at the chaos ahead. "All right, Yellen," she said to her friend and assistant. "Let us see what needs fixing today." The universe was full of impossible situations, and Elena Voss had never met one she was willing to walk away from.